You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
Good day, my name's Mike Whitney. I played for the Randwick Cricket Club in Sydney and got to play for New South Wales in the Sheffield Shield and first class cricket for 14 seasons, which was just amazing, and had the wonderful opportunity to play 12 tests and 38 one-day games for Australia, which was a boyhood dream, an absolute boyhood dream. I'm now the president of the Randwick Petersham Cricket Club and have been for 26 years. I love cricket, and I'm happy to be here talking to Jack because you're watching the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Joining me on today's cricket discussion is a former Australian Test cricketer. In a Test career that spanned from 1981 to 1992, he played 12 Test matches and took 39 wickets. In an ODI career that spanned from 1983 to 1993, he played 38 ODIs and took 46 wickets. After retiring from the game, he pursued a career in television and became one of Australia's best-known TV personalities. Many will remember him on such shows as Who Dares Win, Sydney Weekender, and Gladiators. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Mike Whitney. Mike, welcome.
Good on you, Jack. Very happy to be here, mate, on the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. I actually bowled a few Dibbly Dobblies when I was younger. Got a little bit quicker after that, but no, happy to be here to talk to you, mate.
It's great to have you, Mike. And look, this is probably the one episode I've been looking forward to the most because of who you are as a person, your story, and it's quite an incredible story, which we'll talk to you about today and all that. And many people listening and watching will learn more about you as a person because, as I said, many people remember you for television than they do for your cricket career. Yeah. But you were a very good cricketer and played for Australia and had that honor of doing that, which gets lost, I suppose, in the television stuff, which we'll talk about in our chat. But you are the fifth Australian Test cricketer that we've had on the pod, behind Nathan Horrocks, Jason Gillespie, Peter George, and recently we interviewed Paul Blocker-Wilson. So no one can take that away from you, Mike, just like they can't take it away that you played Test cricket for Australia. So you have that honour forever.
I think the great thing, Jack, which wasn't really prominent when I made my debut, which was at the most craziest debut back in 1981, which we'll probably have a yarn about. But I wasn't aware that we even had numbers. It wasn't spoken about then, and now it's spoken about a lot, and you know what your number is. And my number's 313 in Test cricket, and I think it's 76 in one-day cricket. And no matter what happens to me, when I'm long, long gone, in 100 years' time, those numbers will still be beside my name, and I'm very privileged and humbled to think that. Yep.
Definitely. Absolutely. And we will talk about the Test career and the ODI career and many other things as we get into this chat. So, Mike, as I do with all my guests that I've interviewed on the podcast, I like to take them back to when they first got into cricket, and it's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they started to get into cricket. So, Mike, let's go back to the very beginning growing up. I know that's a long time ago now. What are your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket? And who were some of your cricketing idols growing up?
Earliest memories of watching cricket were black and white on the ABC television on Channel 2 here in Sydney, and listening to the cricket on the radio. It was a very different world back then. I was born in 1959, so I'm talking about the early 60s. And I come from a family that was more rugby league orientated. All my cousins and my dad, his brother, my mum, from the areas that they come from in Sydney, loved the rugby league. My dad's family was a diehard South Sydney Rabbitohs family. So my sister and I got, inducted into the Rabbitohs the day we were born. And to be honest with you, Jack, that was my first dream and I played rugby league up until I was 20. My first dream was to actually be a rugby league player. So I love my rugby league, and cricket was something that I started to play at school, at primary school. And I really enjoyed my cricket. but I didn't enjoy it as much as rugby league. And then when I was about 10 or 11, a mate of mine said that this fellow had spoken to his mum that she knew from this junior club in Sydney called Botany United, and they were trying to get an under-12s team together, and they couldn't get enough players, so they were looking for some younger kids to come and play. And 3 or 4 of us who were going to school ended up playing for this club, Botany United. So that was when I was about 11, I think I played my first sort of Saturday morning game on the mats and on the concrete in some of the local parks. I still live in the same area. And we were all rounders. I mean, we all batted and we all bowled. And this guy, Alan Cook, his parents ran the club, and Alan was the coach and the manager of our young team. Mate, he'd drive around the suburb and pick everybody up in his car. He'd fit like 10 kids in the car, which would be totally illegal now. But there'd be 6 in the back seat and 3 or 4 in the front seat with Alan, and then we'd turn up at the game and he had the kit in the boot, and we go and play cricket in our volley OCs. There was no sort of other running shoes around at the time. We all had shorts on with long white socks and a white little buttoned up shirt. It was crazy. But I started to enjoy that, but I was still really focused on the rugby league, and my rugby league life was amazing at the time. I didn't realise, but I was playing for the La Perouse United and the Ella brothers, who ended up being some of the greatest rugby union players for Australia, played in that side with another guy called Lloyd Walker. He ended up playing rugby union for Australia. They switched codes when we got to about 16. And it wasn't until the cricket, after we got to under 12s, there was no more sort of cricket after that. There was no under 13s, under 14s, under 15s. In the competition at the time, when you finished under 12s, you had to go and play with the men. And there was only A grade and B grade in this South Sydney junior area competition. So at age 13, we were playing B grade with the men. And luckily the competition wasn't that good when I think about it now, that we could still have a bat and have a bowl and do okay against these men who were just turning up basically to have a hit on a Saturday afternoon. And the story goes like this, Jack. I was 17 and because I kept playing 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I'd play rugby league in the winter, and that was my main focus, and then some cricket in the summer. And when we got to playing this B grade, I'd go surfing on a Saturday morning down at Maroubra Beach, because I lived just behind Maroubra Beach in a suburb called Matraville. And we'd go surfing in the morning at 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, and then get home about lunchtime. And then we'd go and play cricket starting at 1:30 on a Saturday afternoon. And I played this, I was getting bigger and a bit stronger and letting a few go. And we played against a side called Marcelin, which is a Catholic school in the eastern suburbs. And there was one older gentleman playing in that side, which was a bit weird because everybody else was like our age, 16, 17, 14, 15, 16, 17. We found out later that he was captain coach and one of his sons was playing in that team. So he used to look after all the boys and make sure they were right, like the original coach at Botany United, Alan Cook, did for us. So he came in and I thought, I was 17 and I thought, who's this old digger? I'm going to give it to him. So I bounced the shit out of him and I was starting to let a few go. And what I didn't know about him was in his younger life, he'd played first grade cricket for Randwick and he'd made centuries and double centuries in first grade, which was a pretty high standard in Sydney. And after that particular afternoon where I'd bounced him and bowled pretty quick on the concrete and the mats to him, he rang the secretary of the Randwick Cricket Club and said, there's this maniac running around playing for Botany United B grade. He's got a big afro and he's a left arm fast bowler, and I think you should try and get him down to play lower grades for Randwick and see what happens. So this guy started ringing our family home, because then you could look up in the telephone directory and look for Whitney in Matraville, where I was living, and that was our home number there. There was no mobile phones or anything in those days. So this fellow, Lyle Gardner, started ringing our home, and I was saying to my mum, I don't want to play cricket all day from 11 till 6. I want to go surfing in the morning and go and have a game with the boys in the afternoon. And then he rang that much that one day I heard the phone ring. I was just about to go to the beach. I had my board. I was waxed up. Had my wetsuit, ready to walk down. It was about a 20-minute walk from my house down to the beach. And I heard my mum on the phone, and she walked out and she said, "That Mr. Lyle Gardner will not ring this house again. You're playing fourth grade this afternoon," because a couple of guys had pulled out of this fourth grade game. "You're playing fourth grade and you're going to go and play because this gentleman's rung the house. He's the secretary of the cricket club, and I won't have him ringing this house asking any more." And now, I didn't have any long whites. I only had one mate who I knew that had long whites. So my mum rang his mum, and I borrowed his long whites. And a fella called John Warwick, who I opened the bowling with that day, bought a bag of spikes. There was like 5 or 6 pairs of spikes in there. One pair fitted me perfectly. And I made my debut for the Randwick Cricket Club in fourth grade at Snape Park, where I played a bit of school cricket for my school, South Sydney Boys High, only in rubbers. But this is the first time I'd ever wore spikes. And it was a turf wicket. And I took 4 for 16 playing fourth grade that day. And something happened in my head, Jack. This penny just dropped. And cricket seemed a different game to me after that day. I mean, I remember I rode my push bike up there, man. I rode home that night and I walked in and Mum said, "How did you go?" And I went, "I took 4 for 16 in fourth grade." And she went, "Well, you're playing proper cricket now," because I was in whites and spikes and we had umpires. And that was the day that turned it round. Now, in saying that, I played rugby league until I was 20 and I still had aspirations to play for the Rabbitohs, but I quickly jumped up through the grades. And before I knew it, I was playing first grade at age 20, and I couldn't do both. And the boys down at Randwick Cricket Club convinced me to give the rugby league away and focus more on the cricket. But it all started at that Botany United Cricket Club and at my school, Matraville Public School, where we had a couple of really good sports teachers who loved their cricket, and we started playing cricket at school. Without that, I probably would have never have played.
It's one of those sliding doors moments in life.
Yeah, 100%.
100%.
100%, Jack. I remember going to Coogee Oval for my first couple of practices, and Alan Turner was there, who'd opened the batting for Australia in the mid-70s and played in the first World Cup for Australia and got 100 against Sri Lanka, and that was the first 100 in one-day cricket for Australia and World Cup cricket for Australia. He was in the nets, batting, left-hander. And I knew he was from Matraville as well. Matraville's a little suburb behind River Beach, and there's been 3 Test cricketers come from Matraville. First Alan Turner, then myself, and David Warner comes from Matraville. And it's only a very little suburb, mate, but there's been a lot of great sportsmen come out of Matraville. But I just couldn't believe this Alan Turner was there. And there was another guy at training called Ron Crippen, who had played cricket for New South Wales. He'd also played on the wing for the Rabbitohs, and he's also played first grade rugby union for Randwick Rugby Club, Ron Crippen. He was a bit of a sporting legend. And there they were in the nets, and I just couldn't believe I was bowling in the nets next to them when they were having a hit. And very quickly, Jack, I just really fell in love with the game. I mean, I really fell in love, and I wanted to bowl as fast as I could, and I wanted to play proper cricket. That's what my mum kept saying. "Well, you're playing proper cricket now in long whites and your shirt and your spikes." And it was a real revelation. It was a sliding doors moment. The pennies just started to drop, and I really started to love it.
Yeah, definitely. When did you realise that you were good enough to potentially play for New South Wales and make that step up to play Shield cricket, and then eventually have the dream of playing for Australia one day after that? So when did that realisation come? Maybe I am good enough to, be a part of the stateside.
I had a pretty rapid rise up through the grades. I played that first year in fourth grade and did pretty well. The next year I played fourth grade again, and I took a lot of wickets. I took like 40-something wickets in the competition, which is a great season. And we won the competition, on the back of myself and another left-hand seamer who wasn't as quick as me, a guy called Eddie Fletcher. But he'd been around playing grade cricket for a long time, and he really taught me a lot about bowling left arm, about bowling over the wicket left arm. The angles are different to a right-hander. We need to have our fields like this, and he swung the ball a lot, Eddie. But I was much, much quicker than him. Anyway, we won that competition. And then the following season, I got selected in third grade and only played a couple of games in third grade. And the second grade bowler got injured about third round of the competition. So, and I got some wickets in the first couple of rounds in third grade. So they popped me up to second grade. And again, I took another 40-odd something wickets in second grade that year. And we won the competition again in second grade on the back of me taking a lot of wickets and another guy at the other end. Can't think of his name now, but we had a really good side. And a lot of those second grade players over the next few years ended up going up into first grade and play first grade for Randwick. So we won the comp in second grade. And then the following season, which was 1979-80, I got selected in second grade again. And at Christmas time, just before the Christmas break, we have 2 weeks off in Sydney when the test match is on, and they give grade cricket a break. This guy called Chris Williams, who'd come down from Newcastle, and he was opening the bowling in Randwick first grade, he got injured. So just before, it was about halfway through the season, Chris got injured, and I'd taken a lot of wickets again in second grade. And they put me into first grade, and I played that half a season in first grade in 79-80 and exploded. I took like 35 wickets in the back end of the season and hit a few blokes in the head and broke a few arms. And there was a few left armers playing, but I was a couple of yards quicker than everybody. And I was very competitive and nasty and a bit angry. And I think that I lost my father when I was 16. And it was very difficult for me to work out. He died of cancer and what had really happened. And I'd sort of gone off the rails a little bit with a few blokes, local mates at school and that, but the cricket was trying to pull me back and say, you've got a bit of ability. And then I had this insane back half of the season in 1979-80, and we won the competition again. So I'd won it in fourth grade, second grade and first grade, 3 years running. And at the back end of that season, that half a season that I played, Lyle Gardner, the Secretary of Randwick, Alan Turner, who'd retired from first-class cricket but was captaining the first grade at Randwick, so I got to play with him eventually, which was just crazy. And another journalist, a legendary journalist called Phil Tressiter, who was the president at the time, had spoken to some people at Cricket New South Wales, or the New South Wales Cricket Association as it was back then. And I got an invitation to go out and bowl to the New South Wales Shield squad as a net bowler on the SCG number 2. It's a totally different setup at the SCG now. And look, my cricket hero had always been, Dennis Lilly, all those guys were fantastic. I loved them all. But my cricket hero was Doug Walters. So I go out in 1980, and there's Doug in the nets. I couldn't even look at him, Jack. I'd had posters on my wall, and I'd had the Chappell brothers as well, and Rod Marsh and Dennis Lilly on posters on my wall. But there was Doug Walters and Rick McCosker and Dutchy Holland and David Colley and all these guys that I'd read about. Stumper Rickson, Len Pascoe, Jeff Lawson. It was just an amazing array of unbelievable cricketers. And I went out there as a net bowler, and to bowl it at the SCG number 2 with all these amazing cricketers around you, it really, really inspired me. And I had such a good season that at the start of the next season, 80-81, I found myself in the New South Wales squad. And to my great shock, I got picked in the first game, which was, I think, the 17th to the 20th of October, 1980 in Brisbane. And I went up there in that 12 and I got selected to make my debut. And I'd only played half a season of first grade. So I didn't even really understand the nuances of the game. Just run in and bowl quick, mate. That was the whole thing at that stage. The opposition had Kepler Vessels and Martin Kent, Greg Chappell captained that side. Jeff Thompson played, Carl Rackerman played. It was this was just a whole new world for me. I just couldn't believe. And I remember being in the dressing room and Dougie Walters sitting next to me, mate. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't, I couldn't, I couldn't look. Ian Davis played and Trevor and Peter Toohey played and Len played and Jeff Lawson played, Stumper Rickson played. Half of them had played, all of them had played Test cricket. I mean, it was just insane being in the dressing room. And the opposition was fantastic. And it was at the Gabba. And that was it, mate. I was hooked. I was gone. I was gone prior to that playing first grade, but that sealed the deal. And I thought, wow, like, how amazing is this playing on this ground, the Gabba, and I'm bowling to Greg Chappell. And, like, he's one of the best players in the world and ended up being regarded as one of the best ever. It was just crazy. It was really, really, really bizarre.
Yes, it's as you said, it's, just happened so quickly. You just couldn't keep up with everything that was happening.
No,
really.
It was hard to absorb that I'd only played that. There'd been guys in Sydney club cricket that had been, wielding away for years trying to get that opportunity. And here I come, bang, burst on the scene, big afro, big chest running in like this, trying to bounce everybody and being really aggressive. I remember in that game, I was only talking about this the other day, that Greg Chappell came in batting number 3, and I'm bowling at the time. Jeff Lawson and Len Pascoe opened the bowling. And I bounced Greg Chappell, and he sort of got out the way, and I stood there and stared at him. And I went, there's more of that coming. I mean, how insane to say that to the captain of the Australian cricket team when that was my first game. But, mate, that's the way I played the game. That's the way. It was a bit of rugby league hangover as well, Jack. I was a very aggressive second rower in rugby league, loved tackling and loved taking the ball up. And I think a little bit of that spilled into the cricket until a few blokes patted me on the head and said, hey, you can't do that in cricket. You just be aggressive with the ball, but, keep the mouth shut.
Yes.
Not that I did.
Well, not back then, with some sledging going on there, part of the game, as they
Absolutely.
say, Mike. So then you're playing for New South Wales, and that's a perfect segue into the Test career. It was only a short career. It was only 12 matches, but every single one of them, something happened. And there's a story to be told from them, really, which is pretty rare for a player to say that they can actually tell a story from each of their Test matches they played. For you, it was only 12, full of ups and downs, a lot of injuries, a lot of setbacks, but memorable in every sense of the word. So let's go back to 1981, the Test debut against England, the old enemy. It's an Ashes Test. It's Botham's Ashes, Old Trafford. You're over there playing club cricket. No one knows who you are. We talk about this metronomic rise.
Yeah.
And you get selected to play for Australia in that Test match, at that 5th Test. And obviously, we know what Ian Botham did in that series, and Australia were a bit demoralised by that. And the Ashes were gone. But you were drafted in, and the rest is history, as they say. But the story of that is incredible in itself.
Yeah.
So take us back to that moment, Mike. Your memories from your Test debut, but the build-up and the anticipation of, making your debut and then, getting, presented with all your Australian kit, meeting the teammates that you will play with. It's just an incredible story. If anyone hasn't heard it, it really is a tale to be told.
A lot of the guys that I played were playing club cricket with, and a lot of guys who were playing for New South Wales, who were in the New South Wales squad were going over to play cricket in England. And the rules were very different then. You could go and play Lancashire League, or there wasn't a restriction on overseas players. They could have 2 overseas players even in the Lancashire League. So a couple of the guys at Randwick, which was my club, had played at this club called Fleetwood in the Northern League in Lancashire, up near Blackpool. And they'd had a great time. And after that first season I had with New South Wales, I only played 4 games for New South Wales, but they were very, very good to me. The other 6 games that I didn't play, they made me 12th man. So I actually was with the team for the whole season, whether I was playing those games or not playing, I was 12th man, and that gave me an opportunity to learn about first-class cricket and how people prepared. And I got to watch Len Pascoe and Jeff Lawson and how they were preparing for these games because, mate, play a 4-day Sheffield Shield game is a lot different to playing a grade game on a Saturday. And you've got to back up the next day or back up a day after that and bowl another 20 or 25 overs. So the fitness levels you have to learn, and stretching and flexibility and understanding the whole basis of what the team is and how that team operates, and where New South Wales, and we'd won the Shield the most, and they used to talk about that, the greatest state, province or county in the history of cricket. So it was a really steep learning curve, but I wanted to go to England. I was really desperate to go to England and play cricket. So I signed up for this club, Fleetwood. So I turned up at Fleetwood, and Fleetwood was a little bit like Matraville, which Matraville was, you know, a very working class area. It was pretty tough. There's a lot of fights at school and stuff like this, and everybody's parents either worked in a factory or drove a truck, or, you know, my father was a truck driver, and it was very similar. Played hard, drank hard, partied hard off the ground. But when the cricket was on, you were playing for Fleetwood, and it was on for young and old. So myself and a mate of mine from Randwick, Peter Devlin, went over there. Peter was the amateur, and I was the professional. And there is moments, Jack, in your life that I think about now. And look, they got me to live with a couple of older people, Edith and Eddie Funk. Now, yeah, which is a Dutch name, but when he, with that Lancashire accent, and he introduced himself as Eddie Funk, and I didn't think he said Funk. I said, "How do you spell that, mate?" He went, F-U-N-K. Eddie Funk and Edith. Edith was 65 then. Eddie was 75. So they were older people, and I was 22, and I was ready to go to England and rock and roll, mate. Play cricket, party on, chase as many girls as I could, drink as many pints of Boddington's Bitter as I could, and just have a great time. So I wasn't spending a lot of time at home. I'd get up and Edith would have breakfast for me, the big English breakfast. And they were the most beautiful people. And Edith ended up, Eddie died a fair few years after that, but Edith ended up being like my English grandmother. And every time I went back to England, I went back to her house, and I stayed there with her and Eddie until Eddie passed away, and just the memories. But I went to Fleetwood. Anyway, I'm home this particular day, and the phone rings. And Edith said, "Well, can you answer the phone, Mike?" And to answer the phone, it was, "Hello, Fleetwood 2791." That was the number, Fleetwood 2791. And there's this Australian voice on the other end. "Widow, is that you?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "This is Greg Geese." Now, Greg Geese was also in the New South Wales squad and had played a couple of games, and he was on an Esso scholarship. Esso Oil had provided these scholarships to Australian cricketers. Carl Rackerman was at Surrey, and Greg Geese was at Gloucestershire. And he said, "Look, I know you're playing up there at Fleetwood, but a couple of the fast bowlers, one of them being the great South African Mike Proctor, and another guy called Brian Brain, who I'd never heard of, but he took a couple of thousand first-class wickets. They're injured, and they're looking for a fast bowler to fill in. Why don't you come down for a trial?" And I said, "Well, look, I've got to talk to the chairman of Fleetwood and the captain and whatever." So I had a word with those guys at the end of that day, and they said, "Mate, go down there and have a trial with Gloucestershire. As long as you play for us on the weekend, we don't care what you do during the midweek." And a lot of the county games were 3-day games at that time, and they were Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday games. And on the Sunday was a John Player League 1-day competition. And the people at Fleetwood said, "If you're not playing for us and they want you to play first-class cricket or 1-day cricket for Gloucester, go." So got me kit, got on the train from Blackpool and caught the train down to Bristol. Geesey picked me up at the train station. We had the trial the next day. I bowled really, really well. I remember the secretary calling me over to his office after I'd bowled about 7 or 8 overs, maybe 10 overs. And he sat me down and he said, we want to sign you up. I went, okay. He said, have you got an airfare to go home? And I went, no, I haven't. Like Fleetwood had paid my airfare there, but the deal was I paid my airfare home. I said, no, I haven't got an airfare home. He said, we'll pay for that. He said, if you get picked to play a 3-day game, and I was on £65 a week at Fleetwood, we'll pay you £275 for a 3-day game. And if you play a 1-day game, we'll pay you £180. Do you have a car? I went, no. He said, well, organise your car. And then he said, and if you sign the contract today, we'll give you £1,000 cash. Well, £1,000, Jack, back in 1981, considering I was getting £65 a week, was like serious money. And I remember he said, have you got any questions? I went, yep, only one. Have you got a pen? Passed his pen over and I said, look, I can't sign it. I've got to ring the guys at Fleetwood, talk to them. So I rang Frank Knappman, the chairman of Fleetwood. And he said, well, that's my consideration. As long as you play for us, any other time you're available, you can play for Gloucester. So they put that in the contract. And I signed a contract that day and I drove home that afternoon from Bristol to Fleetwood in a Fiat, brand new Fiat, Mia Fiore, with Gloucestershire County Cricket Club on the side. And bang, next minute I'm playing a couple of first-class games for Gloucestershire and some John Player League games, which I think were 60-over games back in those days. And, of course, the Australian team's touring England on an Ashes tour. And they'd actually watched a couple of these games on the TV and seen me bowl pretty decently. And in one game against Surrey, I'd knocked over the top 4 batsmen, and some of those guys were ex-Test players for England. So I'm playing at the Cheltenham Cricket Festival in a 3-day game against Hampshire, and it's day 1 of that game. And the room attendant brings a phone out and he says, Mr. Whitney, there's a phone call there for you. So, and the 5th test is coming up. It's starting in a couple of days' time. And it had been in the press that Jeff Lawson and Rod Hogg were under an injury cloud. So they had Dennis Lilly and Terry Alderman, and then seamers after that, like Trevor Chappell, Graham Beard, blokes that could just bowl little dibbly dobblies. And I picked the phone up and there's this Aussie voice on it going, now listen, mate, you've been picked for Australia. And I thought it was a mate of mine ringing up. So I actually said, fuck off, and hung the phone up. 2 minutes later, it rang back and this voice said, Michael, this is Fred Bennett, the manager of the Australian cricket team, and you've been added to the squad because of these injuries. Get in the car now and drive up from Cheltenham, which is a couple of hours drive, up to Manchester. We're at the Grand Hotel. We'll be waiting for you there. And I only told this story a little while ago. I cannot remember one thing about that drive, Jack. Not one moment can I remember being in that car because it was so surreal that the manager of the Australian cricket team had called me at the Cheltenham Cricket Festival. And I was sitting there watching our guys bat, and Malcolm Marshall was playing for Hampshire, and he was bowling like the wind. So I was real happy that I didn't have to face him, let me tell you. But I can't remember the drive, but I can remember pulling up outside the Grand Hotel and the concierge was there. Oh, Mr. Whitney, how you going? We'll look after your car. And all my kit was in the boot of the car. And Fred Bennett had said, come up to room 223 and knock on the door. I'll be waiting for you. So I go up and knock on the door and Fred Bennett opens the door. And Fred was the president of the Balmain Cricket Club. And he may have been the president of Cricket New South Wales at the time. So I actually had met him a few times. And the first thing I said was, sorry for swearing at you on the phone, Fred. I thought it was a G-up. And then he went, that's all right, son. Come on in. And Kim Hughes was sitting on the bed. And I'd only met Kim briefly during that first season that I had for New South Wales. And I went, oh, Kim, because of course he was captain of the side. And we shook hands and Kim went like this. Yeah, not only been added to the squad, but you're going to play tomorrow. Like, is this a dream or what? And I looked at him and I went, He said, no, you're not only in the 12, you're going to play, you're going to bowl first change after Lilly and Alderman take the new ball. Well, I mean, I was just gobsmacked. Like, tomorrow was going to be my 7th first-class game. Like, I didn't understand the game at all. I didn't understand first-class level. I thought I did, but when I think back now, no idea. And then off the manager's room was this other room, which was full of cardboard boxes. And Fred was in there and he's throwing stuff at me. He's going, there's your short sleeve jumper. There's a long sleeve jumper. This is a fielding hat. And here's your baggy green. He frisbeed it across to me. Not like now, you get it presented on the ground now with the whole team around by some ex-test player. I got it frisbeed across the room. And I'm holding a baggy green. And then Kim Hughes is sitting there. And Fred's bringing all this gear out and a tracksuit. And it was just bizarre. Anyway, Fred handed me a key and he goes, that's your room key. Your gear will be up. Your kit and all your gear will be up in the room key. The concierge would have taken up there in your room. Go up there. It was about 4:00 in the afternoon. He said, have a couple of hours off. And at 5:30, we're going to have a press conference to announce that tomorrow you'll be playing in the 11. So I go up with all this gear, walk up into the room, and I put the key in the door. And I opened the door. And in those days, you roomed with someone else. And I could see all this gear in the room. And I thought, shit, who am I rooming with? And over in the corner was this fantastic suitcase. And I looked at it and had DK Lilly on the top of the case. And I thought, no. Next minute, Dennis come in. Mate, I stood to attention. I didn't know what to do because he was, again, like Doug Walters, an absolute hero of mine. This guy, and at that stage, he was at the peak of his powers. And I roomed with Dennis Lilly. I roomed with Dennis Lilly, and the next day we're off to the ground at Old Trafford. England won the toss and batted, and I'm out there for the first day of the 5th test, bowling in front of an absolute chock-a-block Manchester crowd. Half of Fleetwood had come down because I'd rung Fleetwood and said, I'm playing tomorrow. So they all had a day off work. They all come down. There was about 30 or 40 people had come down from Fleetwood, and they were cheering for me, but cheering for England at the same time. So it was, again, like getting picked to play my first game for New South Wales, getting picked to play my first grade game. Now I'm playing Test cricket. It was surreal. It was like I was in a dream, Jack. I just couldn't believe, because in the opposition, I mean, Alan Knott was keeping wickets. Mike Brearley was there. David Gower, Mike Gadding, Ian Botham. I mean, Bob Willis, all these guys I'd read about and seen on the TV or heard their names on the radio. I'm now playing against them. It was just an amazing, well, it changed my life forever, but I just, even now when I think about it, I think, how bizarre was that? It was just so surreal. It was like I was in a movie. It was crazy.
Yes, and I was watching the highlights of that game on YouTube. You know, you can access everything on YouTube these days, Mike. And I saw your face when you were walking back with Kim Hughes and he's chatting to you and he pat you on the back saying, well bowled, and you're smiling and you're like, you know, your eyes are just spinning. You're like, this is unreal. Obviously, first test wicket. Do you remember?
Yes, of course I do. The great David Gower. He actually, look, he tried to really have a go at me in my first or second over and nicked one to Graham Wood at first slip. And it went through it flew. And it went through Graham Wood's hands and hit him in the mouth. And Graham Wood had to go off. And I thought, what's going on? What's going on here? I've only bowled a couple of overs and he's nicked one. And Woody's gone off. He just didn't get his hands up in time. But then a couple of overs later, he tried to play the same shot and it sort of went a bit square, and Graham Yallop caught it in the gully and I've got my first wicket. And it was just like running down like this. And it was just, again, just so surreal that I had all these amazing test players that I'd basically grown up watching slapping me on the back. I was very lucky when I got added to the squad. I think there was 5 or 6 New South Wales players in that squad, including Dirk Wellham, who debuted in the next test and got 100. Dirk and I were very similar age, although he'd had a much different route to test cricket or first-class cricket. He'd played under 15s and under 17s and under 19s and all this sort of stuff. But the fact there was a lot of New South Wales cricketers that I'd sort of met during my first season made it a lot easier for me. And John Dyson was actually playing in that test, and he was a teammate of mine at Randwick. So even though it was surreal, they made me feel very welcome and very at home. But yeah, that first wicket, I mean, it's just bizarre, absolutely bizarre.
Yes, and you know, everyone remembers their first wicket and they remember their debut so clearly, as you've just articulated there, Mike, in your way, as only you can do. But it's such a great story and great tale to tell, really. And I said that
I think at the time, no one had ever been selected to play for Australia while Australia was in another country. And that guy was playing in that country, whether that be India or the West Indies, but, you know, England. There was a lot of Australians playing league cricket and county cricket in England, but no one had ever been selected like that ever before. So it was a first. And the reaction back here at home was just insane. And the one thing I do remember during the test match, rooming with Dennis, and he was just fantastic to me, mate. He was just so kind, as was Kim Hughes. A lot of people bag Kim Hughes. Kim Hughes was a fabulous player, but for me as a rookie and him being my first test captain, he was very, very kind to me. He said things like, mate, anytime you need to talk to me, middle of the night, 3 a.m. in the morning, just ring, mate, and I'm good. I'll help you. And this is captain of the Australian cricket team. Fantastic. But I do remember every day of that test match, I'd get back from the ground and there'd be 30 telegrams, 20 telegrams, 40 telegrams, 25 telegrams being sent from home, because that's what you did in those days. There was no mobile phones. It was hard to ring. You had to book a trunk call if you wanted to call from England to Australia, and that could take a couple of days. But a telegram got there really quickly. Mate, I had hundreds and hundreds of telegrams sent from Australia saying, congratulations on your test debut. We're all supporting you, and all this sort of stuff. It was really surreal. It was amazing.
Yes, indeed it was, as it is for anyone. It changes your life, an Australian test cricketer. You become a celebrity and everyone knows you when you walk down the street.
100%. That was the weird thing, even in England. And what they did after that test match, and we lost that test, which was a bummer, and then England went up. They had an insaleable lead, 3-1. But there was one more test to play at the Oval, and they added me to the squad for the rest of the tour. So we played a one-day game at Leicester. We went and played the 3-day game against Sussex at Hove. And then we went to the Oval and played this last test match. But I'd be out with the boys, and some of them wouldn't be recognised, but they'd go, oh, you're Mike Whitney, the bloke who debuted in Manchester, because it was all over the papers in England, all over the papers here. It was again, I'm going to say, it was like being in a movie. It was so surreal and so bizarre. It was really hard to handle sometimes. It's like all these people know me now, and it was really crazy. It was really mad.
Yes, I can imagine. And obviously, you had some standout performances in your career. Obviously, you took 2 7-wicket hauls against the West Indies and India.
Yeah.
But probably your best performance is probably blocking out Richard Hadley at the MCG to save a test match for Australia against New Zealand and give Alan Border his first test series win as captain. Out of all those moments, I probably know what the answer is going to be, Mike, but which one stands out for you? And you're like, I'm pretty proud to do that.
Well, because I had such a stinted career, Jack, I mean, I played those first 2 tests, and then that was 81. That test against New Zealand was 1987. And it took that long for me to work my way back into the team to play that third test against New Zealand at the MCG in a Boxing Day test. And there's a lot of, I was lucky, mate. Out of my 12 tests, I played 2 Boxing Day tests. I mean, blokes that give their left and right arm and their left leg to play in a Boxing Day test. I mean, you want to play test cricket anywhere, but a Boxing Day test in Melbourne, full house, it's just walking onto the ground and the crowd going nuts, and it's just an amazing experience. But as people would know if they're listening to this, my batting wasn't that good. And for me to go in and face, on 5 overs, I think, of the great Richard Hadley, there was so much going. Richard had I think the wicket he took might have been Tony Doddermate or Peter Sleep. For me to go in, he'd equalled Ian Botham's world record. So there's Craig McDermott and me. And now Craig wasn't the world's worst batsman. He could hit a long ball, but we're batting number 10 and 11. And Richard, I think, would have thought, well, I'm going to be the new world record holder in a couple of overs because I'll get McDermott or Whitney out and I'll be the new world record holder. Mind you, he'd bowled 30-something overs that day and he'd just run in and bowled magnificently. He was one of the, we know that, one of the greats of all time. But Alan had not won a series as a captain. And, there were times, I think, in those early days where Alan didn't want to be the captain. He'd taken over after Kim Hughes tearfully resigned. It got a bit too much for Tim. And they went, well, AB, you're the captain. And I think he was very reluctant. That was when sort of Bobby Simpson got involved as a coach in 85. They sent Simo over to New Zealand to, make sure the team was functioning well and what sort of players were in the team. Were they the correct players that they wanted to play for Australia? Was there too much partying going on? Was there not enough dedication? All this sort of stuff. And by, Alan had been captain for a couple of years and not won a series. And I remember when I was walking out to bat and we had to face these last few overs with Danny Morrison and Sir Richard. He wasn't Sir Richard then, he's just Paddles Hadley then. And AB patted me on the shoulder and I went, you'll be right, mate. And I had a batting average of about 4 at the time. And somehow, Jack, I won't talk you through the whole thing, but somehow I ended up facing the last over and I looked at the other end and Craig McDermott's already got his gloves off sort of thing, so he's not running. So I've got to face these last 6 balls and somehow I did. If you look at the footage of that, you see that I actually let 2 deliveries go. I'd never let a ball go in my life. I just wasn't that good to do that. And I shouldered arms twice of these balls that sort of hit the deck and seamed away. And Richard was bowling. And I said to Richard that night in the dressing room, I'm sorry, mate, but I'm going to have to remind you of this for the rest of our lives. And every time I see him, he goes, don't talk about it. He has said, I've done speaking functions with him, the most disappointing day in his whole Test cricket career, that he couldn't knock myself or Craig McDermott over to give New Zealand a win, which would have drawn the series, but they already had the Trans-Tasman Cup, so they would have retained it. The fact that we won the series 1-0 and AB won his first series as a Test captain, it was fantastic. The other side of that, another full-on part of that story is, and Richard took 5 in the first innings and 5 in the second innings. And when you take a 5-fer, you want to keep that ball. So as I'm walking off and I'm punching the air and Craig's next to me and Richard was fantastic. He patted me on the helmet and said, you've done a great thing for Australian cricket today. And Ian Smith, the wicketkeeper, walked over and he gave me the ball. And he said, you deserve that, Widow. You've done a great thing. He said the same thing, done a great thing for Australian cricket today. So years later, 15 years go by, and I'm with Sir Richard Hadley now at a function, and he goes, that ball that you've got from the Test match in Melbourne. I went, yeah. He said, have you still got it? I said, I've kept everything, mate. Everything from my whole career I've kept. He said, I took 36 5-wicket hauls in Test cricket, and that's the only one that I haven't got. And I said, well, Ian Smith gave it to me. That was the end of the conversation. 5 years later, I did another gig with him, and he mentioned it again. So 27 years after Ian Smith gave me that ball, I was at a function down in Melbourne for the 2015 World Cup, which Australia played New Zealand. I remember Mitchell Starc knocked over Baz McCallum with a beautiful in-swinger. the night before that game, a mate of mine, and I sort of started to consider I should give him this ball. It's his ball. If I had taken the fifer, I would have wanted that ball back as well. So they flew me down to Melbourne, and Sir Ian Botham was there, Sir Viv Richards, Sir Richard Hadley. It was a very big official gig. And I got introduced on stage, and I only had 10 minutes, and I had the ball in my pocket. So I quickly told that story over a couple of minutes that Ian Smith had given me the ball, and I said, Sir Richard, if you want to come up on stage. And I handed him the ball, and I said, this is my ball, but I'm giving it to you on permanent loan forever because you took that fifer, and it's the only one you haven't got. But he had a little tear ran down the side of his face, and he put that ball in his fingers like he was going to bowl an outswinger on stage. And it was just an unbelievable moment, me handing him that cricket ball back after 27 years. It was an unbelievable moment. It was the right thing to do. And it completed his set of 36 5-wicket haul balls that he's now got, every single one of them. And we still stay in contact a lot over that. I got letters and emails from people in New Zealand saying what a wonderful thing that you'd done for trans-Tasman relationships. And it was a cricket ball, Jack. It's a cricket ball, but there's so much invested in that cricket ball. And the moment I handed it back to him, he was just stunned, absolutely stunned. And we're great mates, and we send each other birthday wishes on each other's birthday and all sorts of things now with the great Sir Richard Hadley. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's what cricket can do, Mike, bring people together from different parts of the world. As you said, it's just a cricket ball, but he would have felt incomplete, Sir Richard, if he didn't have that ball.
Mate, he mentioned it every time I saw him. He mentioned it. Have you still got that ball? And in the end, it wore me down, and I thought, I've got to give it back to him. And I did it on that night, and Australia won that game the next day to become the World Cup champions. But I'll never forget that night and the look on his face when I pulled it out of my jacket pocket and said, well, there it is, mate. That's yours. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, unreal. So all things come to an end, and obviously the career ends in 1992, the last test against the West Indies at the MCG. Not a bad test match for Australia. Obviously, Australia win.
Yeah.
Warney takes 7 and shows everyone what he can do.
Yeah.
And obviously in that series, the West Indies won the close test match in Adelaide by a run. And they went on to win the series. So it was quite a memorable series. But for you, Mike, your last test match, not many people can say that they dismissed Brian Lara twice in the same test match, which you did for your last 2 wickets, which is something that no one can do. So quite a wide range of emotions from that last test match. So what are your memories of that test match? And did you know then that this probably would be the end of my test career potentially for Australia?
Well, you were hoping not. And I'd knocked Brian over a couple of times in one-day cricket as well. And I had this theory that the ball going into him, he had a little bit of a weakness to, the right armers bowling over the wicket. They're trying to go across him. And if you got that wrong, he just smashed you through the offside as a left-handed batter. And then if you tried to readjust, he was so good on his legs as well. But me coming left arm over the wicket and just not trying to swing it away, just trying to dip it into him all the time. And I'd bowled him in Sydney in a one-day game, through the gate. I'd knocked him over in Brisbane, I think, as well. And then I got pretty much my figures in that last test were like 12 overs, 1 for 20-something. And AB and I had just spoken purely, you're going to bowl to Brian Lara and see if you can knock him over. I'm not saying Brian was my bunny. It'd be nice to say that. But I'd even spoken to Merv Hughes and Craig McDermott. You should come around the wicket, right arm around, and just push the ball into him. But I got him LBW and caught short leg David Boone with those deliveries that were being seaming and pushing back into his body. And I remind Brian that, he's my last 2 wickets. I've got the great David Gower, one of the great left-handers, as number 1, and Brian Lara, one of the greatest left-handers, as my last wicket. But that was a really amazing series. And you're right about Shane. I'd been on a tour to Sri Lanka with Shane prior to that. And that first test match at the Sinhalese Sports Club in Colombo, we won that game after being made to follow on in a massive, massive deficit in their first innings. Gurusingha, Ranatunga and Kalawitharana made hundreds. They made 500 and something. They absolutely belted us around the ground. We got bowled out. We were made to follow on. They only needed 160 odd in that test match to win. And they were doing it easy until Greg Matthews got a couple of wickets. And then the young Shane Warne, who really hadn't had a performance, AB threw him the ball. And I think he took 3 or 4 for 10. And we won the game. And I could see it in Shane's eyes that day on the tour of Sri Lanka that you got to have that performance. Once you have that performance, you gain in confidence, you realise you can do it. But the next time I really saw that was that Boxing Day test match where he took the 7. And I have this picture in my head of being back in the dressing room at the MCG and seeing Alan Border, Shane Warne and Shane's dad standing in the corner just talking about it, and I could see it in his face then that he knew that he could do it, man. He could do it. He understood it. He was really starting to understand his craft. He was getting better with every game, every month that went by. He was getting better. He's starting to really get the seam right. Look, the greatness of Shane Warne, people say this to me, why was he so great? And I'll typically say this. For bowlers like me, it took me an over or two to work out on the day. Was the ball swinging? Was it seaming? What's the carry like? What's the wicket doing today? How have I got to bowl? What's the length? Shane had summed that up in 3 balls. Shane would go, and he'd know by the reaction of the first 3 balls that I've got to spin it this much today to turn it. If I spin it less than that or more than that, it's just going to skid on. And I've got to spin it at this revolutions to swing it in to the right hander and then turn it away. The summation of what he had to do came really quickly. It was within a couple of balls, and that's just masterful. Everybody else, it takes you, I'll just readjust it and do all this, and Shane just bang could sum it up like that. And he got better and better and better. And then when he got really comfortable, he started playing mind games with people like Darryl Cullinan. Poor Darryl Cullinan would walk through the gate and he'd be yelling out, "Bring me on, AB, now!" And Darryl would try not to hear that. And he'd say to Darryl, "I'm going to buy you this, then that, and then that, then you're going to be out LBW." And he'd go this, that, and 4th ball LBW. And Darryl would walk off going, "He just told me what he was going to bowl, and he did, and I'm out again." So he was an expert at that. And just, mate, you could put a tissue on the ground and say bowl on that, Shane, and he could land it there, which means you can set your fields. But it was that day at the MCG, the legendary Zuda ball, Richie Richardson just went straight through Richie and bowled him, and you could see Shane's face, just he understood what he had and where that could go, and became the greatest of all time.
He certainly did. Mind-boggling what he could do on a cricket field.
I took a catch in that 7-for too. I'm really happy to have my name, caught Whitney bowl ball. And it did end up the last test, and I'll tell you why. The one-day series started up in, or a week or so later, and I was playing up in Brisbane against the West Indies, and got hit on the foot by Ken Benjamin, and it smashed one of the bones in my foot. I had to go and have a steel plate put into my foot, and I never really, really recovered after that. I played for New South Wales the end of that season, was 92 through, won the Shield. I didn't get a bowl in the second innings. Neither did Greg Matthews. That was really crazy. Wayne Holdsworth and Glenn McGrath. Holdsworth got 6 or 7, McGrath got 3 or 4. And it was the first time in a first-class game that Greg Matthews and I had played. We played a lot of cricket together. That neither of us had got a bowl in an innings. And I sort of walking off the SCG that day, even though we won, thinking maybe that's the curtains are closing on my career. I tried to play again the next season, but I hurt my knee and went in for my 9th knee operation, and they were starting to pack in. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, pretty much just the body telling you, I can't do anymore.
The body,
I'm
the
done.
body giving it away, yeah.
So, Mike, to finish off on the Test career, many current and former players have a different perspective when it comes to the baggy green. And when you look at that baggy green now and the 12 Test matches, the opportunities you got to wear that, more so when you reflect now in retirement, but what does the baggy green mean to you and playing Test cricket for Australia? What does it mean to you, Mike, when you look at that cap and reflect on the 12 Test matches that you played?
I find it hard to believe, Jack. It seems the older I've got, and I'm 67 now, and it was a long time ago. I mean, that debut in 1981 is a long, long time ago now. And playing against the West Indies, playing against India, playing against New Zealand, going to Sri Lanka on a tour, touring the West Indies as well. I mean, the trouble is when you're playing, you play the next game and then you're on to the next game and the tour finishes and you come home and you prepare for the domestic season and you don't really have a lot of time to really sit down and think. But in your older age, and I've Googled a lot of games that I've played in as well and watched it, and there's been things that I forgot all about that. I forgot that so-and-so scored that 50 or got 100 or someone else bowled or someone Mark Ward took an insane catch at slip. And then I think about it and go, it seems bizarre that I was involved in all that. And I'm very humbled by it, really, now. The more I think about that I got a chance to play. Look, I thought it was a big deal playing first grade for Ramley. I couldn't believe I got picked in first grade, let alone to play for the Blues. And I played in 4 Sheffield World Shield winning sides and some one-day sides for New South Wales. That's a big deal. But to play Test cricket and represent your country in anything, but particularly in cricket, and you mentioned the baggy green, like this thing, my son's 32 now, and sometimes he comes to my place, he says, Dad, get your baggy green out. And he just wants to hold it and look at it. And I'll hold it and look at it and hold it against my chest. It's a bit surreal. And I'm really proud that I got to play, and really proud that I got to play with the people that I did, who became, some of them, the greatest players that have ever played for Australia, and the people I played against, particularly in that time when the West Indies were around. I mean, they were just like an unbelievable side. And to say I got to play against Viv and knocked him over in that 7-for that I got at Adelaide, Gordon Greenwich, Brian Lara, Carl Hooper, Desi Haynes, and the fast bowlers, I mean, it is a bit surreal, but I'm really humbled by it and I'm very proud of it. And I'd do it all over again tomorrow. And I'll quickly tell you this. In the last 4 years, I've had my knees replaced. I've had 3 discs in my neck replaced with artificial discs. I had some lower back surgery earlier this year to fuse a couple of vertebrae. And I've had carpal tunnel done on both my hands as well, all in the last 4 years. So my kids have said, wow, Dad, like, that's a lot of surgery and it's been a lot of recovery. Would you do it again? Look at both my hands, Jack. If I had another arm, I'd be putting that up as well. If I knew that I was going to have all this surgery in my late 60s, that would not deter me at all, because I got to play for my club, my state and my country. And I'm very humbled by it and honoured by it. And it was just a wonderful time to play cricket as well. I think because there was none of these around. And it was just a fantastic time to be alive and to play cricket.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose it goes back to what we said about the cricket ball with Richard Hadley. It's a cricket ball, but the baggy green, it's a piece of cloth and fabric, but it's more than that.
It is, mate. It's that, people used to say this, well, they don't give them away in cornflakes boxes, do they? And I go, no. That's the special thing, mate. There's, you've got to play Test cricket for Australia to get one of those. And when you've got it, it's just it's like my baggy blue cap as well for New South Wales. They're just these treasured possessions. And all I hope is that, my son will eventually have that cap. and then I hope it just keeps getting passed down through the Whitney line. And in 5 generations' time, they say, well, my great-great-great-grandfather played for Australia, and this is his baggy green, and it's a treasured possession in the Whitney family, and it will be. It will be for sure.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And we have to touch on your one-day career as well, Mike. And that was a bit longer than your Test career, which I suppose in a way was a bit of a bonus. 38 matches is pretty good. That first ODI against New Zealand at the SCG, your home ground, if I'm not mistaken, you didn't play a Test match at your home ground either. So to play an ODI at your home ground special.
Yeah.
And, it's the early 80s and one-day cricket was becoming a new thing after World Series cricket towards the end of the 70s. And it was a new thing that people got engaged with. So what are your memories from that first ODI after a couple of years after your Test career and now playing an ODI for Australia? It must have been a different experience.
It was an amazing experience because during World Series cricket, my mum actually got us some tickets. So my sister, my mum, and one of my good mates, my mum got 4 tickets to the very first game of the second season of World Series cricket. And at that stage, Kerry Packer had built lights at the SCG, and that allowed World Series cricket to be played on the major grounds, which they didn't in the first year. And I was sitting at the SCG. It was Australia versus the West Indies. It was coloured clothing in World Series cricket. There was 50,000 people there that night. The atmosphere was unbelievable. And the very famous part of that story was there was that many people outside the ground that apparently Kerry Packer went, open the gates and let them all in for free. So they all came in. It was chock-a-block. And I'm sitting there. I was about 18 or 19. So I was playing second grade, I think, for Randwick. And I said to my mum, I give her the elbow. I said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to play under the lights in the coloured gear. And you always want to play Test cricket as well. But the atmosphere that night was so amazing, man. And the West Indians had Michael Holding and Joel Garner and Andy Roberts and these unbelievably fast bowlers. And I was sitting in the bob stand, which is now not there, watching them side on. And it was so fast I could hardly see the ball going through. So I said to my mum, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. 5 years later, I run out to play a game for Australia against New Zealand there. And Greg Chappell was the captain of the side with all these fantastic players. And my mother reminded me that I'd said that to her sitting at the SCG watching that World Series game. So it was a real, again, just another surreal moment. I don't remember too much about the game, to be honest with you. I don't remember, but I remember being at the SCG, which was my home ground. I played a couple of seasons for the Blues, and being in the home dressing room with Australia and all these amazing cricketers around me and the crowd. And in those days, on the fence, there were like tin advertising signs. So when I come on to bowl, people were going, Whitney, Whitney, like loud, because they knew I was a local New South Wales boy and I was an eastern suburbs boy, and sort of the SCG's in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. So it was like a real home game for me. And yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
And obviously probably the pinnacle of your career is that you got to play in a World Cup, which was the famous one in Australia and New Zealand, 1992.
Yeah.
And you're one of Australia's best performers in that tournament, with the leading wicket taker with 9 wickets. And Australia didn't have a great series, defending champions, playing at home, didn't quite handle that pressure all that much. And wonderful to see Pakistan defeat England in the final, and Imran Khan, and who you played with.
Free Imran.
Yep. He was a great player himself and led Pakistan to that final against England. And we're going to fight like cornered tigers. And and it was a great tournament, full of innovations and things that we'd never seen before. White ball, coloured clothing, playing at night, black sight screens. It was quite a memorable World Cup for all those reasons. What are your memories from playing in that tournament? Obviously not so great with Australia doing badly, but from terms of playing in a tournament like that must have been pretty special.
I was in pretty good form, and I'd sort of come out of playing this series against India, and I'd played 3 tests against India out of the 5 tests, and I'd taken 17 wickets, which included 11 in Perth. I took 4 and 7 for 24, 4 for 60 odd and 7 for 27 in the second innings, and won the man of the match in this test match in Perth, which was, again, just crazy. I mean, you just, not that you don't think you're good enough to win a man of the match award in a test match, but when it happens, it's like just crazy. And then the World Cup started, and I was really desperate to get picked in the World Cup squad, and I got announced in the World Cup, and that was a real triumph for me as well. And I was 33 at the time, which was crazy. Like, people sort of focus on doing all this when they're younger, but I just, by that stage in my career, I knew who I was, how I could bowl. I'd really changed my action to be really nice and economical. I was hitting the seam and swinging the ball a little bit more than just, letting it go when I was a young bloke and relying on pace. And I think all the knee surgeries I had actually made me cut down my pace. I'd cut my run up down, but still the ability to sort of get them to carry through. I definitely remember the first game in Auckland. Martin Crowe got a beautiful 100 and we got beat, and I never got picked in the 11. So I sat in the sheds watching that game, and I was very frustrated because I was really on a bit of a roll. I was bowling really, really well. I knew where they were going now. And, of course, one day cricket's like 50 overs, most runs win. You want to bowl your 10 overs for 30 or 35 or even 40, because if everybody goes their 10 overs for 40, they're only going to get 200. So you're trying to just bowl dot balls and make sure that you're bowling to your field and stuff like that. And we got beat in Auckland. And as I said, Marty Crowe got a beautiful 100. What a player he was. And after that, I pretty much played every game and bowled pretty well in every game. I was really happy with the way I was going. Physically, I was very fit. I was strong, knew where they were going. But we just looked, I think, coming out of, I can say this now because Bobby Simpson's passed away. Coming out of the series against India, it was a 5-test series. We just didn't really have enough time to readjust to playing one-day cricket. And if you talk to a lot of the guys who were in that squad to play in the 92 World Cup, everybody will say that. It was just really difficult coming out of a test series and not having too many practice matches and then, reverting down into one-day cricket. For me, it wasn't a problem. I didn't have a drama with it at all. And I was just humbled to play in a World Cup for Australia, the 1992 World Cup. I was desperate to get into that squad. And when my name got read out, or you got notified that you're in the squad, mate, that was a massive triumph for me again.
Yeah, definitely. It's always a proud moment to play in a home World Cup for any country, really. And hopefully we have a good World Cup next year in South Africa and Zimbabwe and
hope so. I remember talking to Imran Khan when we played them in Perth. I think we played them in Perth, and they beat us, if my memory's correct. But Imran had played for New South Wales in 1984-5. He'd spent a first-class season there. So we got to know him really well. We nicknamed him Ace because he was our ace in the pack. He was the trump card. And I've got to say, look, there'd been international players that had come out and played Shield cricket for other states and a few for our states. And they'd played okay, but they hadn't really put in. Mate, Imran really, really put in for us. He ran in and bowled a lot of overs that summer. He'd got some really crucial runs with the bat. We won the Shield. I spent half the season out injured with knee problems. But he was fantastic, and we had a really good relationship with him. He was a pretty cool dude. All of a sudden, him playing for New South Wales in 84-5, there was a lot more women turning up in the bar at the SCG than had ever turned up before, just because Ace was playing for us. And I remember during the 1992 World Cup, I ran into him a few times, and he really had that side cooking. Like, they were amazing. And you remember the final against England, where Wazzy just, and Waka Yunis, they were just unplayable, mate. And what a great moment for Pakistan and Imran Khan. That was absolutely.
Yeah, sort of really capped off that tournament in style, really.
Yeah, it did.
There was some great cricket that was played throughout that tournament. And for you to play in that is a special moment that you'll always remember. Hi, everyone. Hope you enjoyed part 1 of our cricket discussion with Mike Whitney. I hope you enjoyed hearing Mike and I discuss Mike's cricketing journey, Mike's Test career, and Mike's ODI career. Stay tuned for part 2 of our cricket discussion with Mike Whitney.